record. Welcome everyone, good evening. Thanks for joining us for our third and final workshop on the Community Food Access Program through the Colorado Department of Agriculture. We're so happy you're here and are excited to have some really rich discussions with you all in our breakout sessions shortly. I'm going to get us started with our land acknowledgement. Today, we underscore, reflect on, and celebrate the histories, culture, experiences, and contributions of Indigenous communities, the first peoples and stewards of the land now known as the United States. Before it became Colorado, this land was home to many tribal nations, including but not limited to the Apache, Arapaho, Cheyenne, Lakota, Pueblo, Shoshone, and Ute. Other tribes whose territory sometimes extended into Colorado included the Comanche, Kiowa, and Navajo. Colorado was a site of trade, travel, gathering, and spiritual healing for these tribes, and is currently home to over 200,000 Native, Indigenous, and First Nations people, including 2 federally recognized tribes, the Southern Ute Tribe in Ignacio and the Ute Mountain Tribe in Toyac, as well as the Northern Ute Nation near White River and all other tribes and Indigenous peoples who are not federally recognized. We offer our deepest gratitude and respect to the many Native leaders and groups who are active on the forefront of necessary social progress, helping to bring equity and justice in reach where it's needed most. Please join us in honoring the past, present, and future of Indigenous communities. So my name is Dana Wood. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the Community Investment Manager with the Colorado Blueprint to End Hunger. I'll be helping to facilitate tonight's workshop. I will also be monitoring the time and the chat box. If at any time during the meeting you have questions, please type them in the chat box and I will make sure to get a list of those going so that we can answer those during the question and answer portion later on in the session. Please stay muted if you're not speaking. And also, if you're able to type your name, pronouns, and organization or community in the chat, that way we can track your attendance and make sure that you get compensation if you did request it in your registration. You could also rename yourself on your photo box if you're on an iPhone or happen to be on someone else's Zoom account. You can do that by clicking the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner of your photo box and then selecting rename and typing in your name. Hunter will be also helping to monitor the chat and will be available if any tech issues arrive. So feel free to chat in there if you're having any issues with Zoom. He will also be assigning folks into breakout rooms later on in the session. And now I will turn it over to folks at CDA and we'll get started with tonight's presentation.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you everyone for being here this evening to discuss the new Community Food Access Program and be part of this program design. My name is Mickey Davis, and I am lucky to be the program manager for this program here at the Colorado Department of Agriculture, or CDA. Tom Lepetsky is the Markets Division Director, and this program is in the Markets Division. And then we also have Hollis Glenn here this evening. He's the Deputy Commissioner of Operations, and he'll be giving the second half of this presentation. So here's what we have planned for tonight. First, the CDA team, myself and Hollis, will describe the components of the Community Food Access Program as outlined in House Bill 22-1380. And as we're going through this, like Dana mentioned, please type any questions you have about this program or the bill in the chat. And then we'll be addressing those questions at the end of this presentation in a 10-minute Q&A session. But really the whole purpose of this workshop tonight is to really hear from you. You all are experts in food access, farming, your communities. We want to hear about how we can make this program as impactful as possible. So we'll be spending about 40 to 45 minutes in discussion group breakout rooms, which will be facilitated by volunteers and folks that are also involved with this program. So that's our plan for tonight. So jumping into it here, House Bill 22-1380 became law in the spring of 2022, and it's called Critical Services for Low-Income Households. And it called for the establishment of the Community Food Access Program at CDA, among other things. And the purpose of this program is to improve access to and lower prices for healthy foods in low income and underserved areas of the state by supporting small food retailers and small family farms. So there are three main elements of this program, which we will discuss. The first is the consortium. The second is the grant program and the advisory committee. And the third is the outreach strategy. We will also discuss the funding source for this program, the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, also known as SLFRF, and what CDA, our contractors, and our grantees will need to do to stay in compliance. So we'll start with SLFRF. This fund is a subset of the American Rescue Plan Act funds, which are for programs directly related to COVID-19 recovery. For this program, the Community Food Access Program, $8 million was allocated to CDA. And because all of the activities related to this program are supported by these federal stimulus dollars, everything must tie back to the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. These funds come with pretty specific reporting requirements, which CDA will be held to. Our department must use a competitive process to identify contractors to work with. Beneficiaries of the funds must report on indicators, and receipts must be submitted, to give a few examples of some of these requirements. Also, really importantly, these SLFRF funds must be encumbered by December 31st, 2024, and totally spent by December 31st, 2026. So you can see we're under a bit of pressure to get this program set up quickly. So we're going to be referencing small food retailers and small family farms quite a bit in this presentation. So before we dive into those program elements, let's outline how this bill defines those eligible businesses. So small family farms refer to Colorado-owned and Colorado-operated farms that generate under $350,000 in revenue each year. And small food retailers is defined as a Colorado-owned, Colorado-operated, independently owned or nonprofit owned and operated store, which has less than 5,000 square feet of retail space and is located in or provides food to a local, state, or federally defined low-income, low-access population. Additionally, the store must carry at least 3 categories of the federally defined staple foods, which are meat and meat alternatives, bread, cereals, vegetables and fruits, or dairy alternatives. A small food retailer can also be defined as a farmer's market or a farm direct operation, which is SNAP and or WIC authorized or demonstrates an intent to become SNAP or WIC authorized where allowed. So we realize those are pretty nuanced definitions, so feel free to type your questions about those definitions in the chat. And thanks to someone who did the little annotation there. I don't know if you're able to erase that, but otherwise we'll just keep it in our presentation. So now that we've defined those kinds of business operations that are intended to benefit from this program, we can talk now about the elements of the program. So first, the bill calls for the creation of a community food consortium, which will be an association of small food retailers and family farms. And this consortium will serve as an organizing body for these businesses, and will have a budget of $1 million to address known barriers that these businesses have to offering healthy food in retail environments. So these include providing technical assistance in purchasing and negotiations with distributors, subsidies for pallet break fees and distribution fees, connecting small food producers to small retailers, providing value chain coordination, and much more. So there's a lot of potential for this consortium, and we're especially interested to hear your thoughts about this consortium and what it can be in the breakout sessions. So at this time, I'm going to hand over the presentation to Hollis Glenn, who will outline the other elements of the Community Food Access Program.
Great, thank you, Mickey, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time to learn about this new program. So the second element of this program is called the Small Food Recovery and Resilience Grant, or we'll refer to it as the grant part. In the grant, there will be $7 million to allocate to small food retailers and small family farms in the form of one-time grants up to $25,000. The grants will be focused on supporting infrastructure for the retail sale of healthy foods. A priority will be to keep the application process as simple and as streamlined as possible for our beneficiaries. In other words, we want to simplify the application for the small food retailers and the family farmers that are applying. But yet we're still going to want to make sure that CDA is going to remain compliant with all of those federal funding requirements that we're going to have to comply with, since this is a federally funded program. Now, as you recall, the funds have to be COVID related. So applicants will have to demonstrate being negatively impacted by their operations being negatively impacted by COVID-19. With this grant process, we are targeting the mid-June to begin accepting applications. The legislation spells out the use of the grants, which include, but not limited to, refrigeration, freezers, display cases, storage, shelving, accounting and book management support, as well as point of sale machines for retailers, and costs associated with becoming SNAP or WIC authorized. It will also cover large operating costs related to expanding healthy access food. Again, we invite you to add the questions right now in the chat. We want to get as many questions as we can. We realize this is a new program and you're seeing this maybe for the first time. So these questions are going to be very helpful for us rolling this program out in the coming months. We will cover a few of those questions here at the end, but then we're going to take all of these questions and post them on our website. So to stand up the grant program, we're going to utilize the assistance of a grant advisory committee. This is a voluntary advisory committee, and it's going to assist the program staff, Mickey and others at CDA, with developing the application for the grants, the criteria and evaluation components of the process, as well as actually help us review and assist in the awarding the grant funds to the beneficiaries. This committee and the makeup is actually established in statute. The advisory committee, diving a little bit more into it, will be made up of 7 members representing community and nonprofit groups. They're going to include retailers, farmers, an individual experiencing using SNAP or WIC, and we'll also be having CDA staff person on this committee as well. We are actively soliciting invitations and applications to be on the advisory committee. If you are interested in helping or learning more about, or want to learn more about the Community Food Access Grant Program, please reach out to Mickey or consider submitting an application by filling out the Google form on our website. Mickey will drop a link to this website in the chat. Going a little deeper into the advisory committee, going a little deeper into the advisory committee positions and what is going to be asked of the members. The advisory members can expect to participate in 4 bi-weekly meetings from April to June to assist in the development of the grant process and the material. Then the committee will go down to monthly meetings or as appropriate to actually review the applications. All of the meetings are going to be virtual, and compensation is available upon request for those that are appointed to serve on the advisory committee, but who are not otherwise compensated by their organization. We're looking forward to really assembling a team of talented and committed individuals to stand up our Community Food Access Program. So the last major component or element of the Community Food Access Program is our outreach strategy that is actually defined in the legislation that creates the program. Now, we are aware that many small food retailers, small farmers are not aware of this program and the funding opportunities that are going to be available to them. So to address this, CDA plans to leverage the expertise and relationships that the community-based organizations that already exist doing this work, the relationships that they have had and they have built with the small business owners and the local farmers. So this spring, we'll be looking to contract with several nonprofit organizations to implement our strategy to conduct outreach and promotion of the grant and the consortium, and as well as to provide technical assistance to retailers and farmers to apply for the grant. So again, they're going to be helping us promote the program and then assisting those that want to apply with the application process. More information about the CDA solicitation for the contracting and becoming a partner will be coming in the next few weeks. A little bit more about the structure of the partnerships. We have defined 6 regions of the state based on counties, and we will select contractors to cover those specific regions. Again, we're looking for multiple contractors to help with our promotion as well as our technical assistance. We believe having the local expertise in those regions are going to be critical to establishing those direct one-on-one relationships that we're going to need with our beneficiaries. So the Department of Agriculture will host a specific question and answer session related to the submitting a proposal after we make the solicitation announcement. So please hold any questions related specific to that opportunity for that upcoming session. If you want to know more about the contracting and the partnership and the promotional efforts, please join our listserv to be alerted to when those funding or those contract solicitation opportunities are open. So as we mentioned, all these funds need to be encumbered, meaning under contract, by December 31st, 2024. So we are on a very rapid timeline to establish the grant and consortium structures. So we want to enlist the help and outreach of technical assistant partners and start issuing grants and hosting those consortium meetings beginning in early summer. Some key dates to remember here is the advisory committee we're actively soliciting applications now. We hope to have that in place in 1 month in early April. they will then begin to build the contracts, they'll begin building the grant program and the grant material. We hope to then have the solicitation out and hired our contractors to assist with the promotion and outreach of this program and the technical assistance component. We will hope to have that announced this spring and have them hired sometime in mid-May. Then our consortium program will be built, in which the first meetings of that consortium will start in early June, and then the grant opportunities that we will be making available again to retailers and farmers will begin around mid-June. So that is a little bit about the timeline that we are looking to move forward. So that is our high-level overview of the elements of the Community Food Access Program. And as you can see, this is a foundational structure of the program, and it is based on the statutory and federal requirements that have been laid out to create this program. But we know that statutes and program compliance do not make a successful program. Our success is going to come from the partnerships we develop with people who have on-the-ground experience in this line of work. That's why we're devoting the rest of this workshop to hear from you. Before we do that, we want to dive into the Q&A session. I want to emphasize ways in which you can stay involved. First, again, please join our listserv. We'll be putting that in the chat. And then also here is a live QR code that you can use that will directly get you connected with our listserv. This is where you'll receive updates and opportunities and learn when the grants are going to be opened and what the criteria will be. And as we mentioned previously, you can also apply to be part of our advisory committee. You can find the application on our website. We'll also be posting the solicitation for outreach and technical assistance for the contractors on our website as well in the coming weeks. Also, Mickey's email is here for any specific questions that you may have. To wrap up my comments, we know that there are very many wonderful organizations and hundreds of experts who have focused on food access issue in Colorado for years. And the Colorado Department of Agriculture, quite frankly, is really honored to be playing a part in becoming a partner in advancing that effort. In our breakout sessions, we're going to be asking you about what access to healthy food is like in your community. What resources could a consortium, or like kind of think of it like a co-op, what resources could the consortium offer your community? What challenges do you think small food retailers face in supplying healthy food to their communities, as well as other questions? Your input will really help the Department of Agriculture develop grant opportunities. We'll be able to, that are going to be on point and help us anticipate and identify the hurdles in implementing this program in such a short timeline, in a way that we can develop this program that is going to be as impactful to farmers and to retailers and ultimately to the end consumers that are in need. And we want to make this program as impactful as possible. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear lots of comments. We want to hear these questions. We are still developing this program. And so the questions you may ask, we want to hear. We may not have the answers right now as we are still developing this. So this is but we welcome that. And we'll take your answers and we will then post them on our website, or your questions, and we'll post them on our website as we mentioned. So with that, I want to hand it over to Dana to be able to facilitate some of the Q&A, and then we'll go into the breakout sessions. So once we've done all that, you can go. We won't come back as a group, so we can go ahead and sign off. So before we let everybody go and before I sign off, I want to really, on behalf of Mickey Davis, Director Tom Lipinski, Commissioner Kate Greenberg, I want to thank you guys again for taking the time to learn more about the Community Food Access Program and your willingness to provide your expertise and input on how to make it a success. And with that, I'll hand it over for Dana to do questions and answers.
Thanks, Hollis. And before we jump into Q&A, just to remind folks, if you could please rename yourself on your little photo screen if you're on an iPhone with your first and last name. We want to make sure that you get your community compensation that you signed up to receive in your registration. And also so that we can put you in the correct breakout session. So if you don't know how to do that, you can go to the 3 dots on your screen, click that, and then select rename. So we do have about 3 questions. The first one is from Jason. Can a nonprofit farm be considered a small family farm?
Yes. As long as it's Colorado owned, Colorado operated, and just that revenue threshold or maximum ceiling, $350,000 a year is max revenue.
All right, the next question is from Devin. Can we request that this PowerPoint be available via Dropbox or G Drive?
We will definitely post this recording. And yeah, I see no reason why we can't share this PowerPoint. I'll need to check with some of the experts here at CDA about what format we can share it in, but we can certainly share it.
Very good.
And then the next question is from Kenna and Mark. Are these funds targeted to farms and businesses already accepting SNAP? Or will this be all kinds of food will all kinds of food access be considered? And maybe Kenna and Mark, if you want to come off of mute and just kind of clarify your question a little bit.
Right. So we're maybe like one of the farms that would eventually apply that deal with a lot of food access in our community, a small family farm. And like we haven't really gone through, we've kind of tried to start the SNAP process for our farm stand and haven't really followed through just because we haven't been able to find good support to get it set up. And we're wondering if that would make us not be able to qualify for applying for these funds, or if there's a way to get assistance in getting set up.
That is such a good question, Mark. That's exactly the kind of project that these funds and this consortium is designed to help support. That's one direct example. We know there's a lot of other possibilities for how these funds could support food access in small food retail settings, but that one is expressly called out as one that is a perfect use of these funds.
Okay, the next question is from Anne. For this grant, will grantees have to follow federal compliance regulations?
So the federal compliance regulations are definitely a big puzzle that CDA is navigating. Grant applicants are not expressly held to these federal reporting requirements, but CDA is. So there's certain paperwork, receipts, outcome measures that we will have to report on as the agency that's receiving the federal funds. So it's our big task to create a program that keeps us compliant with what these taxpayer dollars are intending to do, but not make a grant program that's so burdensome and full of legal jargon that it discourages small food retailers and small farmers from being able to apply, if that makes sense. Hollis, I don't know if you want to add anything onto that.
Yeah, no, I think you said it well. I think that our goal objectively, and we will obviously have, this will be laid out in detail. And again, this is one of those, this is a great example of why we want to hire these contractors in the 6 regions to provide technical assistance, because there's going to be a lot of questions about that. And so we will equip those contractors with this knowledge to help walk people through and understand what is required of this grant. Our goal is, and we are still efforting, you know, the agencies in charge of this whole thing. We are, the goal is really that we want the requirements for receiving a grant to be the same, and we still will have to comply with state grant requirements. That's just going to just be the standard. If we can, that people are typically used to when applying for grants, if that is the standard that we can hold here, then I think that'll be very successful, because that is something that is usually kind of what people are aware of and used to. And I don't think there's going to be too much extra that the federal requirements are going to drive down to the beneficiaries. There's a lot on our end as those responsible for this money, a lot of compliance on our end. Our job is to weed that out so we can keep the beneficiaries process as simple as possible.
All right, good questions. Next one is from Jason. Can these funds be used to grow produce specifically for WIC participants? And Marcy also seconds this question.
So we have to kind of go back to the mission of this program. The idea is to support and enhance the retail sale of healthy food environments in community. So if you're talking about the growth of produce specifically to be sold in stores to WIC participants, that seems like a very eligible project.
I would agree. When we look at what the grants can do in broad categories, it's operating costs and purchasing large equipment. And there's specifics in the law that says what that is, but those are included but not limited to. And so our vision is that we would, and this is what the advisory committee will do for us, is help us really line out the criteria of, okay, what does that mean from a retailer and a farmer as far as what would be an eligible use? Purchasing large equipment like a refrigerator truck, absolutely. Purchasing a building or purchasing a storage or helping making an expansion. If it's helping you with your operation to drive healthy food to these areas, or if it's equipment that you need, we hope to have kind of identified a fairly extensive list of what would be eligible. So in this scenario, the farm that is growing food specifically for SNAP and WIC programs, yeah, if that farmer needs specific equipment or operating costs, those would be covered, just like any Colorado small family farm.
Okay, Devin has a question. Can you explain how you arrived at the 5,000 square foot limit on the definition of a small food retailer?
Thanks for that question, Devin. And this brings up a really important distinction that we want to bring up here, is that Hollis and I and the whole CDA team didn't really come up with any of this. This is all spelled out in the bill that our legislators passed. So what we've explained in our presentation is essentially what's in this bill that Hollis dropped in the chat, if you want to read the bill text. And also layered on top of that are these federal requirements with that come with the funding source. So yeah, we don't have a whole lot of insight into how that number was arrived at, but when we've asked for clarification, it's very specifically talking about the retail area, not including any back storage or just square footage of the property. It's just the front end part where customers can be.
And we have another question from Holly. Would a CSA in an online marketplace be considered a retail outlet?
So by my understanding, any store that's selling food and meets that criteria that we talked about, either as a farmer or a small food retailer, would count and would be eligible.
I just want to give Holly extra points for a great question, because we thought about this thing very over the weekend, and do CSAs fall into this category? And the answer we think is yes.
And then Jason asks, what if the farm doesn't have a retail outlet or sells food in a traditional way? And maybe Jason, if you want to come off and just clarify a little bit more about your question.
Yeah, sure. So our organization doesn't, I represent eCar Farm, and we don't actually have a retail outlet. We don't sell food in a traditional way. We find and access public and private funding to essentially give it away. So we participate in giving away 30 CSA shares to WIC participants every year. We do food boxes through HFDK. So our farm doesn't really have a retail outlet in a traditional sense.
This is a tough one for me, Jason, because I don't have all the answers here. And this is exactly why we're hosting these workshops, because we want to hear about these specific projects and programs that are happening across the state that we want to consider as we work with our advisory committee to build out this consortium and this program. So what I can say is that food pantries and food banks are not eligible for the grant. So yeah, I think we would have to look a little bit further into that model and where that would fit in with what the statute says.
Can I ask Jason a little bit? I think the definition in the statute of a family farm means a farm that is owned, Colorado owned, and Colorado operated, and annual gross revenue of $350,000 or less, right? So if it's zero, that's less. If you're a farm, you don't have to have a retail outlet, and I think that's an important distinction to make here. This funding is available to food retail, establishments, retailers, but also just your average small family farm that is supplying food, through a distribution system, however that is, to those low income, low access areas, to retailers, right? So there's 37,000 small family farms in Colorado. They, depending on what they want to use this grant for, so long as it's moving their product into these areas for low income, low access, and helping with the overall access, that would qualify, even though they don't do retail themselves. So if you're a farm under 350, you very possibly could be eligible.
And Sue Ellen is asking to clarify, if food pantries or food banks purchase from small family farms, could they still qualify?
I think you guys can see how we're getting into a very nebulous area of gray territory. I want to defer to more research to get back to you on that one, Sue Ellen. Hollis, do you have anything to add? You're muted, Hollis.
this is a question that has come up in these previous two workshops that we had. This is a technical legal interpretation for this, so it's not like we don't want to do this. But so I think this is one of the key takeaways that we will have, and obviously the answer to this question we posted on our website is once we go back and say, what does this and how do we interpret this as it relates to food banks? And we'll get that answer to it. And we want to make sure we don't mislead anybody here tonight.
We have a question from Holly. Do you see duplication between this program and the LFPA program, or how do you see this program is different?
That's a good question. So the LFPA program, anyone with other expertise here, chime on in, is a program for local food purchasing through Colorado CDHS. And it's very targeted on food pantries, food banks, and expanding in that way. And that is sort of where our program is, as it's written, is intended to, back to that mission statement, increase access to and lower prices for healthy food in low-income, low-access areas of the state by supporting small food retailers. So really, small food retail is the heart and soul of what our program is. And based off of our understanding, there are a lot of small food retailers in the state that we know are the lifeblood for communities, serving, supplying culturally appropriate food, often the only retailer in their area. And we know that real food access comes not just from food that you can get for free from a pantry or food bank, but also a huge web of support services, including retail. So retail is really the direction this program is looking to go, based off of what we understand of the legislation.
And then Christina has a question. If I have a farm for rent, can I qualify? And maybe Christina, if you want to come off mute and just describe a little bit about what you're asking, that might be helpful.
It's more like a land that we're renting. So would that be part, like, can I qualify with that, or?
You
Because
don't need to
it's-
own
okay.
your property to be, as long as you are a farming business, and you meet that other criteria, you would qualify.
Okay, thank you.
And then Kenna and Mark have a question. It was mentioned that applicants would need to show being negatively impacted by COVID shutdowns. Do we know what that kind of proof will look like? Many small farms increased sales during the pandemic, but incurred many negative costs and impacts.
So Kenna and Mark, this is such a good question. This has been coming up at every session. It's an area that we are exploring more with the exact criteria needed from SLFRF. A lot of it has to do with, identifying a class of businesses that were negatively impacted or disproportionately impacted. This is an area we're very much still exploring. Hollis, you want to add anything?
I think that we'll look to see what that means and define, negatively impacted by COVID somewhat broadly, but within bounds. I don't imagine that we're going to be looking to say, hey, look, show us your financial records that we're going to die. We don't want to really have a high bar on that, so to speak, as far as material or documentation. But we will be looking to provide more clarity on what this means and how an applicant can satiate that requirement.
Thank you. This is Ken and Mark just chiming in. I think that's a great strategy, and just like being able to prove like loss of sales streams. Like our farm was one. We used to go like to 5 farmers markets a week, and then we had to figure out how to do everything online and transition our whole philosophy after that. And so like those kind of documentations of just like, yeah, we had to change our entire business model in 1 or 2 years. Is I think all small farmers and small retailers can relate to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely understand the challenges of having just one definition of what negatively impacted means. So we're definitely taking this into consideration as we're developing this program.
And we'll take one last question before we go into breakout sessions. And Dr. Pena, I think it might be helpful for you to come off of mute and ask your question. Just to clarify, he's asking how climate chaos and justice impacts are addressed in this program. So if you want to come off mute, that'd be great.
Just a brief comment. I think they're interrelated. And that at the San Luis People's Market, just to give you one example, we had to hire about 20 people last year, since we took over March 1st, in order to keep a steady crew of about 4 or 5 people because of COVID and other related medical issues. We have a 15% diabetes rate, and a lot of our staff have diabetes. So I think it's not just COVID-19 that in a community like ours where you lack health equity, you're going to have a whole set of compounding factors that create challenges for a small retailer like us. And we had recruited 10 growers last year. We only got 5 with water. And let me just mention one other thing. The reason I asked about the 5,000 square feet is actually because we're really, as a retailer, we would be a food desert if the San Luis People's Market closed down. We all know that. You'd have to travel 100 miles round trip to Alamosa. If you go to Fort Garland, that's not a full service and it's not healthy food. So we don't even talk about that. But let me point something out. We're dependent, we inherited from the R&R a membership in Affiliated Foods Incorporated out of Amarillo. They're our primary supplier, but the produce they send us is limp on arrival. Now, we did research and we visited similar markets like ours in Antonito and Monte Vista, and they might get Melissa salad in a bag with a 10-day to 2-week expiration. We get it with a 5-day expiration or less. There is racism in the wholesale distribution network. And so our response to this is we need support to build a greenhouse so that we can grow our own fresh produce in the back acre of the property. And there would be 0 carbon impact. You're basically running it from behind the market property to the market on demand, and we would be able to provide people with fresh produce from our greenhouse. And in addition to that, we need to note that what happens with this sort of situation, other than the racism of the wholesale distribution networks, is that the people don't want to buy the produce because it already arrives in a poor condition. Now, the 5,000 square foot thing is related, because is that going to be considered retail space? I would think not. You answered that question. I'm not worried about the greenhouse somehow leading us to exceed the 5,000 square foot. But we're going to open up a commercial kitchen to do nutrition and cooking classes for SNAP and WIC recipients. That's also going to be a restaurant and deli. Does that mean that now, where we're converting the hardware space, the current hardware space, into this commercial kitchen, Molino operation, local foods incubator, to create agricultural wealth that we create and it stays in the community, are we going to be punished for doing that? Because that is a retail space as well, but it's educational, it's an incubator to help especially local women start micro enterprises for food we can sell there at the market. So as you can see, we're going to, once we integrate the commercial kitchen, we could be in trouble and not be meeting the definition of the 5,000 square foot. And that, to me, I think is really wrong-headed. Now, there are 2 separate addresses, so we can actually maybe apply under both of them because they're separate entities in the management structure, and they even have separate electrical systems. systems, right? The commercial kitchen, restaurant, deli, community space, and the incubator space is separate from the actual grocery and small hardware section. So you see how complicated this gets. But I'm
Yes.
really concerned about the discrimination in the wholesale distribution system. Just because you're getting fresh produce doesn't mean it's any good.
Mm.
So we need to address that issue. And I think a lot of the bigger impact, especially in a community like ours that has such a high rate of diabetes, is you've got to let us do the nutrition and cooking classes. We need a commercial kitchen to do that.
Mhm.
That could have a longer term impact than just an investment, say, in a refrigeration system, which we would love help with too, by the way. But anyway, I've talked too long. I apologize.
I really appreciate these comments, and I just want to highlight the way, to address this other point we brought up, that small food retailers can be this hub of opportunity for health and community. And I think everything you just said really illustrates that so much. I do want to just put a technicality there. A commercial kitchen, a restaurant, deli space, that would not count as food retail. So, that you could subtract that from the square footage. And I agree, there's many wider issues to address here. And one potential we see with our program, which is just so focused, these one-time small grants, one thing we do see we can maybe do is use our consortium to hopefully bring all these small food retailers together with small farmers with all their great ideas, and see the potential of that connection, and also connecting that community to more resources. We have other opportunities at the Department of Ag that we can connect folks with. There are other interagency resources that we can sort of facilitate a connection to. So Hollis, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, thank you, Mickey. No, I think what you just pointed out there, the consortium, which I know is still probably a little unclear. It's a little unclear for us. It's the component of this program actually that we think has the most potential over the grant program, because we have $1 million for the consortium, and think of it like a co-op. And this consortium will look and say, okay, we have $1 million to help with these various things, including addressing and connecting and improving the food supply chain. So that is so nebulous. And really the vision would be that this consortium is going to be made up of members of small farmers, small food retailers, other people, other associations can be part of the consortium. The benefit of that $1 million has to go to a farmer or a retailer, but that's not to say that we couldn't have others joining us in figuring out what we do in building this consortium up. With it, so the vision would be that we have a consortium, we have a governing council of that consortium made up of its members, of retailers and farmers and others, that would help kind of govern and figure out how, and assist CDA with dealing with those other issues, right? That systemic issues of improving the supply chain, paying for pallet breaks or delivery fees that small food retailers have. We could subsidize that. We can do all sorts of money, we do all sorts of things with this funding, and hopefully build something that then is a mechanism, a massive co-op, if you will, that then could then receive additional funding that then can go out to its members. So I think we can address a lot of those issues in the supply chain that you just raised, and thank you for raising those.
Thank you, everybody, for your questions. We want to make sure that you have time in your small breakout groups. You'll have about 30 minutes. So Hunter's going to go ahead and break folks out into their groups. Marcy, I'm sorry I didn't get to your question in the chat. And Dr. Pena, if you want to share I know you had your hand up. If you want to share that in your breakout session as well, awesome. We want to make sure that we capture that. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, everyone. See you in the breakout rooms, and I appreciate you all being here tonight.
Thank you.
Just open up the breakout rooms. You should see a blue rectangle saying join, I believe. There's one remaining person on an iPhone. If you want to come off mute and say your name, we can get you added to a breakout session. Dana, I think
Yeah.
you might be needed as a facilitator or note taker in, I'm not sure if Danielle ever arrived.
Oh,
So I might need you to join breakout room 4.
okie dokie. Oh no, Danielle's in there.
Oh, okay, maybe. I don't know. Maybe somebody else.
I'm
I don't know
looking
what happened.
through. Okay, we have room 2 set. Looks like room 1.
Many of the
Maybe-
people signed up for room 1 did not show up.
Okay. Maybe if you want to move Lynette to room 1.
Where is Linda?
I think she's supposed, she hasn't
She
joined.
speaks Spanish?
I
Because
Oh, yeah,
also
that's a
Lynette was
Spanish
not on the
room.
registration sheet. So I just
Interesting.
added
Lynette,
them
habla
here.
español. I don't know if she's even there.
Yeah, I think Angie and Jose were both added to rooms. They just haven't joined over.
Okay. And I see Angie's there. Angie, oh, yep, she just went and
Mm,
joined, maybe? No,
Necesita ayuda? Oh, there she goes.
there she goes.
Well, actually, I think she left the meeting.
Oh. And then was
We
Jose,
could potentially just combine rooms 1 and 2. There's only 4. Oh, Angie just popped back in.
so if you want to put her in room 1. And then Jose hasn't joined. Was Jose on the list? I think he was.
I think so, yeah.
Diego, are you able to
Yeah.
ask Angie if she needs help getting into her room? Maybe it looks like she might be having issues with her connection. I think she keeps
Yeah,
freezing.
I think it was probably an accidental disconnection.
Yeah. And then Diego, if you want to ask Jose if he's able to join room 2, if he needs help with that. Yeah, it looks like Angie's frozen. I thought I saw Jose like try to put his camera on, but nothing's
Yeah,
there.
his camera's like
It's like
it's a
black.
bar, so it looks like it's
Mm-hmm.
on, but maybe covered. Angie, she dropped out again.
I think she's having issues with her computer is what it looks
Yeah.
like. Maybe Jose is trying. I'm not sure. Diego, were you able to communicate it? Oh,
Want me to turn off interpretation, Diego? Of course I can.
if you put anything in the chat. Jose is not answering, and neither was Angie that he said. Okay,
Okay.
cool. Thanks for trying, Diego.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, we'll just hang out here.
Do you mind
Um,
grabbing, taking off recording?
Oh yeah.
I always forget